Hi there, everyone. My name's David Jenkins. I'm the editor of Little White Lies magazine, a film magazine made in London in the UK. Um, I've been invited to host this panel looking at insights into the craft category of the NAD Awards. The general focus is the idea of adapting to production in the COVID era and taking a look at some of the awarded work that was created in this very taxing year, but also teasing out insights from the panelists on the skills and processes maybe that are going to be needed for the years ahead now, and the changing tides of society. Um, so the way that we're going to organize this panel is each of the panelists have selected some choice work, and I'm going to ask them some questions about why they've picked that work and try and tease out some insights on its kind of wider value. But first, I'd love everyone to introduce themselves.
Hi everyone, I'm Asavari and my pronouns are they, them. I'm a director and a producer based in Bombay. I primarily look at work which has women and queer narratives at the center of it. So I do a lot of work which is around these themes. I also curate a lot of work around visual arts. I do a lot of experimental work. I studied in London for about 4 years. And yeah, and now I'm taking some baby steps towards changing some sort of representation in Indian films globally.
And next up, Paolo.
Hey, my name is Paulo Garcia. Hi, everyone. I'm a director and creative director at Zombie Studio. It's a production company based here in São Paulo, Brazil. And I'm also represented by Blink Inc., an animation production company based in London. I used to be art director. I spent 14 years working side agents, and 10 years ago, I decided to found my my own studio, and we do a lot of animation, and I'm always looking for the best craft inside my films. So to judge the D&D for me was a great experience because I had this opportunity to find this craft all around. And it's a pleasure to be here, guys, with you all.
Thanks, Paolo. So next up, Shireen.
So I'm Shireen Mustafa. I'm the head of AV production at LibreNet Dubai. It's been 15 years with LibreNet. I spent the first 10 in Cairo, where it was the hub of the Middle East, where we tried to really work into the craft to reach international markets. And this is what took me to Dubai, and this is what took me to you guys. And it was a great pleasure this year to see how can you really, when you put craft first and when you put the idea and how can you do it in the best possible way, not necessarily with the highest production value, it's how you do it. I was amazed, especially after COVID, to see that, oh, we are still here. We are still in the game. We can do great things. So I was really impressed by the amount of work and the amount of things that were produced during such a very difficult period, which is a pandemic, something that not many of us would experience twice in a lifetime. So yeah, so I'm super excited and super happy to be with you guys today.
Thanks, Shireen. Miran, please introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm Miran. I'm from Barcelona. I'm a production designer, set designer, and art director, and I live in Berlin since almost 11 years. I'm a freelancer, and then I do projects between feature films, short films, music videos, commercials, like a bit of everything. And yeah, I was invited to being a judge in the production design section. And yeah, it was amazing. It was really, really inspiring to see what people did in these pandemic times.
And finally, Paul.
Hey, so Paul Modis, pronouns they, them. I'm an Emmy Award-winning director and producer, and I've been running the Nose Foundation, which is a nonprofit that specifically works on developing people of color, queer, women, and immigrant artists in film and in narrative and media. And I was the judge for the editing, which that's my bread and butter. I love editing. Even though I direct, I always try to nudge people to be like, oh, I'm also going to edit this thing too. And people love that. It's funny. But,
a true auteur.
Yeah, right. Got super micromanaging. Actually, I think I'll handle that part. Like, yeah, very true. Yeah.
Right. So as I said at the top, we're gonna now kind of just go through and actually focus a bit on the work, and I'm just gonna go through the same order again and ask you to sort of just explain what the work is, and I guess in a sort of general way how it affected you, why it stood out, and maybe why it kind of resonated personally as well. Aswari, could you tell us a bit about your first selection and the theme of it, but also the kind of use of mixed formal and style in actually creating this little kind of miniature story, I guess?
Some of the work was really groundbreaking. One of the works that I sort of backed was through and through was Bodyform's Womb Stories, because I think Bodyform in general has been creating a benchmark for advertising for the past few years, towards normalizing conversations around periods. And their new campaign, which I'm going to talk about, Womb Stories, which was directed by Nisha Ganatra, I think has been a great influence and an incredible example of sort of shattering the glass ceiling. With women, especially at the center of it, with women behind the making of it, I think it's a fantastic endeavor that sort of needs to be credited and celebrated. Like you said, David, the kind of this mixed media format that they've used and the choice of shooting the live action sequences traditionally and juxtapose that with animation, it takes it to a whole new level. And I sort of backed this film through and through. And there was a very conscious choice of choosing this film for the panel because Womb Stories, the campaign and the film loudly talks about the taboos women hold back, leaving behind this ultimate question of what is a real woman. So without mincing words, I'm going to be very direct, and I'm going to say, I, as a non-binary person of color, do I see myself represented in this film? No, because the film only talks about women. Is my pain less? Absolutely not. Am I silent about my lived experiences? A gazillion times. Do I deserve authentic representation? Definitely. So I feel there's like a dearth of non-binary, trans, and genderqueer narratives out there, and very few heteronormative cultures people or lives actually initiate and read about the lives of queer folks and our history around the world. So I think this film was even though it was extremely impressive and incredible, and I totally backed it till the end. I think there's still, we still have to push that boundary, and we've taken huge steps to reach here this year. And yeah, it's incredible. But there's this one thing that I would like to sort of push.
Your second choice as well is this really bold depiction of trans lives that has this kind of killer twist provocation at the end. And I feel that does that feed more into this idea of kind of pushing things a bit further? And
definitely, yeah. I mean, we had a very long conversation about this film during judging because there were a few people who thought it was very traditional. It felt like it was a film which should have been in the 90s. And I sort of argued for this film, just having a trans woman at the center of it, Harlow Monroe, is a great step. If this would have been in the 90s, there would have been a man playing the trans woman's character. So I think, just to make that choice as a director is impressive, and it's incredible. And I think it's also sort of, I was also pondering on, because it's something that I always sort of think about, about sort of fashion industry being accountable for being gender sensitive and gender inclusive in terms of clothing and even their stuff. And I know that Diesel with this campaign is sort of looking at releasing a collection of a collection of their work, which is dealing with gender identity and integration into the work market.
It's a fascinating choice to take. Thanks, Ashwari. I'm going to move on to Paolo now. So I wonder if you could maybe talk a bit about your choices and And this idea of like the juxtaposition between the sort of naive form of animation used and maybe the subject matter, which is maybe slightly more divergent and kind of presses against that impulse.
Yeah, what I like about animation is that you can approach hard subjects like the ones that I picked here, and in a beautiful way. It's easier to spread the message using animation. If you try to film that film and not to animate it, perhaps it would be very hard for you to understand the message. Perhaps we will try to pick as example Two Monsters in My Story. It's something very hard to approach. So the way they did it, using animation and poetry, I think help us to finish the film and to understand the message. And the same was happening with the second example, that was Nobody's Normal. You can see that it's a strong concept trying to explain to everyone that for kids and for teenagers that they are not perfect and that they can show the monster inside them. And when you do this using animation, I think you help the message to be spread. And in Two Monsters in My Story is perfect because if you look for the main characters, like the human characters, they are quite strange, and the monsters, they are beautiful. So the character design in that film helped a lot the message. And this is what I like about animation. And you can play with the designs and you can play with the narrative and try to find this balance, in between storytelling and visuals and make it easier to understand.
I wondered are you seeing from your position a shift back to more traditional forms like that? Drawing on these more kind of old school techniques.
Yeah, when I was judging those ads inside the jury, I felt that we are going back to the traditional way of doing animation. Like I think we were harsh with CGI a lot, and we were more kind with 2D traditional animation and more kind with stop frame animation, because I think we are returning to the to the start point, like how to make films like we did a long time ago. And that's what I felt when judging those ads, those both pieces, that they were more, I think they won those awards because of the way they chose to do it, like a 2D traditional animation, like a stop frame film. And you can see that it's easier to approach CGI projects during the pandemic because we are using computer from your homes. But when you see this project, it's different. They did a stop frame film during a pandemic. So try to imagine people doing the different puppets in different places and only being able to film it in the end of the process. So it takes a long time. It's a lot of work to make it happen. I think that's why we enjoy it so much, this stop frame animation.
Great, thanks so much, Paulo. So I'm going to move on to Shireen now, who's picked two really intriguing and more kind of long form pieces. I'd love for you to talk a bit about engagement and what they do to actually keep the viewer, keep the eyeballs locked on the screen for that time, because in this age of social media, it's a big ask.
Exactly. It's a big ask, and it comes with every brief, like, okay, that's the long form. What were you gonna do for the social content? And this is where you come and go and get this piece and try to strip it here and there. And it doesn't really work, because you need to think first of the idea and the medium and the message you want to deliver. And then the form should enforce itself. So I've seen a lot of long form content while we were judging. And honestly, as much as many of them were very interesting, but they just didn't keep you going. They didn't keep you watching. So my first choice is Puja Didi, which is the Facebook one. First of all, as much as I find Facebook a great tool for us to connect and share things together as individuals and as nations, that even one day it started a whole revolution in my own country, Egypt. and been able to help enforce the change that no one ever thought would happen. But for me, it has also heavily affected our lives in many negative ways. So when I feel it coming, really, because we're all having problems with Facebook, should we do too much of social media or less of social media? When this comes and I think about that, every weapon can either protect us or kill all of us. This piece of work really sheds the light on the strength and the real power of the role of how Facebook should work, the human aspect of it. It really stood out to me. It's very difficult to make a super specific cultural thing appear to the world in a very modern and interesting way and keeps you going. I didn't need to read all the subtitles sometimes. I just needed to look at the face of Pooja. The wide range of emotions and the way the craft led me, the casting choices, the acting, the use of music, cinematography style, everything was put together. And it really made me think like, this is really genuine. I've seen a lot of work that it was perfectly done, but it didn't touch my heart. This just struck my heart and made me feel like, yes, we can have a weapon, we can have the technology, we can have the platforms. It's all about how we use it.
Seeing these films, like the thing that kind of came to me was that that there was a certain crossover with, I guess, like narrative feature films. I guess the first one is sort of taking on that form. You could imagine this sort of being like a whole feature film almost, because it has these fleshed out characters and it has this narrative arc. And then your second choice is like drawing in a kind of parodic way on like the conventions of cinema as well. So there is this kind of it's almost like a suggestion of it's sort of looking to the future of cinema in a way.
First of all, the second choice was the shot on iPhone by Damien Chazelle, the vertical cinema one. And also comparing what Apple is presenting here is very different than the other type of work. Because for me, this piece of work goes against everything I like about cinema. And as a producer, being asked to cut everything into vertical, it's just as if you're cutting a piece of me every time. So I chose that piece of work because it goes against everything I really believe in. If you look at it, maybe you've seen something similar. Maybe you've the collage between the different genres. You've seen it. We've all seen it before. But because they took everything and put it in this very much smaller, less than half of the screen, it really triggered me. Like, no, I should respect that. Maybe the problem is that from the ideation stage, we should think, how would this idea fit that platform? Not like just going with the traditional advertising, producing a film, and then yalla, we want all these formats and the different sizes. It just doesn't work that way. So, and that's what really made me love what I hate most, and that's what I like about it.
In a way, we kind of arbitrarily arrived at this landscape format for viewing screens, and you know, it kind of asked, the way that it kind of deals with the history of cinema, it asks that kind of, it's almost like a kind of speculative history where it asks, well, what if on day one we had these, you know, upturned letterbox views, and that's just how people choreographed and composed, you know. So it's fascinating in that way too. Miren, who, I mean, what your first choice? I had to watch that one twice because it was mind expanding, shall we say?
Yeah, yeah, that's why I chose it.
And I would love to hear a description of it from you. Like, what is this thing?
Yeah, well, I don't know where to start. You know why? No, no. I think like what first of all catch my attention of this is because it was submitted with no information. So you couldn't see what was all about, who was the client. It was really almost nothing, no explanation. And then you clicked on the play and you went into this crazy surreal world full of details, things happening, weird creatures, all also handmade. It was just like, I don't know, explosion of ideas and I don't know how to explain it. And I think I never saw anything like that. And then also just that with this crazy, I don't know what I said, like explosion of images and ideas, then it makes you curious to know what it's all about, right? And then you have to research yourself. So I thought that even like the whole thing is a masterpiece, it's like art. And then when you research what it's all about, then it's like the way they make you wonder what it is. I think that's I don't know, amazing.
Yeah, I'd love to know, like,
Yeah.
from your stance as a production designer,
Yeah.
what kind of feat was the production in your view? Like, I mean, is it how would you have approached something like that?
Oof, that must have been a huge amount of people creating from the littlest, tiniest thing to the biggest. I think there is a storyline for sure. There's one person explaining things while he's walking around this place that is also a reality inside another reality. But yeah, it has. I think it was a huge team of our department producing all different kinds of objects and creatures there.
I'd love to also quickly talk about your second choice, because I guess it's intriguing in it from a production design perspective, because it is kind of it's almost like a feat of digital production design, where you have like this landscape and these worlds that have been digitally imposed on kind of human characters. I'd love to hear your take on it, and what it was that resonated.
Yeah, I think what both things have in common is that production design is about creating new worlds. So both created a different world. One is like you cannot put it in a box because I don't know what it is. The other one is like the typical futuristic reality. But I took it also because I thought it was representative from a lot of things I've seen in this panel. Because I think there must have been something going on in the pandemic where like all the stories were like a travel, like a trip from a screen to another world, and then from the mouth to somewhere else. No, like I think it's very representing of what I've seen and what is going on now. And there were also a lot of good ideas about these futuristic elements. And for production design, you can imagine, how it was. And yeah, I'm sorry, I'm not like saying anything deep as does the other one, but I think for us we were judging these creativity ideas and visual richness, and both of them have it.
I think what your two choices definitely have, which is a kind of interesting thing, especially in this kind of fairly dismal year, is they're both really funny, and like it's kind of great that there is still people can still tap into this kind of darkly humorous world, even if they are both looking at these kind of dystopias.
Exactly, they are both dystopias, but that's maybe something that also inspired these times, right? Like, how could it be if reality changed completely how we knew it?
Exactly.
And I think, what else to say? Yeah, as production design, I really value that the ideas are really in the middle point, not that you can, wow, how cool is that idea? And it's important.
Great, thanks.
And it's fun, yeah.
Thanks so much. Paul, thank you for your patience. We're coming to you finally. So two really intriguing choices. Both actually, I think of all the panelists here, I think your choices are probably the most different. So I'd love for you to sort of talk about both of them, but as kind of almost poles apart in terms of formal creation.
The first choice was I think it was called what was it called again? It's like a PSA announcement for child abuse, which first of all, is the first thing, I think when it comes to craft, having to deal with certain subjects that are hard to talk about in the public, or things that are pretty much skirted under the rug, that already is its thing. And you're also talking about, in the US we have the FCC regulations you have to do too, so you can't show things that are too violent or that are deemed unnecessary or blah blah, right? So what got me with this video was the fact that it used images that were engaging and yet they were simplistic in their own in their own selves, right? Like the first image you see is a chair sliding across the room, hitting a wall. That's it. But it arrests you, right? It immediately grips you because there's something violent about that inherently, and you don't know why. And then it keeps going. Editing wise, I think the most brilliant scene was having the child reenact what the parent was doing to them. And there's a moment where a young child, she comes out and sits down and just literally like points out the off screen, and then she pauses for a minute, right? There's no sound that's playing, and then she just bangs her hand on the table. And when that happens, you hear this like wind chime type of thing. It's not what you would expect to hear, obviously, right? But it did something. It really kind of pulled in this idea of how these sort of traumatic events do wear on your psyche in a way that's not necessarily clearly there, right? I thought every single choice they had wasn't simply on the nose or something meant to shock you. It was simply meant to pull these certain feelings or to conjure these feelings that do happen. These certain things that happen in PTSD when you are remembering these certain moments. I don't know how else to describe it, but I think that's one that stuck with me, like even to this day. I mean, I'm a survivor of child abuse. I'm a survivor of a violent household. So to see someone tastefully depict this and not try to indulge in the violence or to upscale or upplay the type of abuse and how it happens. You know, I loved how they depicted it, how they actually crafted it. And when it comes to editing, beautiful. Sound design, the soundscape was wonderful. It wasn't just stupid like like a little piano or sad piano playing. It was, let's feed into the emotion of it. Let's actually have a riser placed right here at this moment. Let's have like some wind chimes that actually are going to be reflected 3 scenes after it's introduced. Beautiful. Best use of Elcut I've seen like this year, definitely. So yeah.
Certainly for a PSA, there is something quite sort of, it lures you in this. It kind of introduces itself as one thing, but then leaves you with something completely different. Where this one, End Violence, is very kind of lyrical. Your other choice is couldn't be more strict and formal and beautiful in a very different way.
I mean, it's very it's frenetic. It's beautiful frenetic pacing that takes time at certain moments. But I think what really gripped me was that to make someone who's not a fan really kind of like to pull me in, because I see NBA commercial, I instantly just turn off. I don't really care about basketball, But they did something else really interesting. One, you're dealing with found footage. 2, you're taking photos and mixing in with the videos that are there from the live event. I can tell you, just because that has been my thing, is just making documentary films. Found footage sucks to edit. You gotta just hours and hours and hours, and for you to go through entire game after game after game to just find when that photographer took it at this angle. NBA games don't just have one camera, not even 2 cameras. You're talking about 45 cameras. That is some editing work. I know there's a team on that. But still, like, I didn't have a repeating pattern for more than 4 to 5 seconds, which is really, really, that's hard, right? Like, as an editor, you got to think about your rhythm and how that is. A lot of times we're not editing in real time. We're not gonna, listen to it all the way through, and then you have to kind of like move these things around, and then kind of guess a little bit and then go back. But to get them so that they're not repetitive, engaging nearly every time the stanza would come in, the music would have this thing where it goes tick 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 da-da-dum, tick 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 da-da-dum. Every time that happened, they would change their pattern to another editing style that was still engaging, which is hard. It's just, I respected the craft. I don't know, I mean, like, it was very different than the PSA in terms of the mood, but still the craft was there. I could see it. I respected it when I saw it. So, yeah.
It's the sort of thing that I think that many people would watch. It might kind of turn up on the TV or come up in between your favorite show, and it would just kind of drift by, and people might take it for granted. But like, I think it's great that we can actually give it this forensic view and put a pause on it and actually look at the kind of formal acrobatics that go into the creation of these works. So, but yeah, thanks so much, Paul. That was really great insights there. I guess the clock is ticking a bit now. So what I want to do is sort of go back through everyone and just I guess I want to ask a more general question. Like you kind of you guys have spent time looking at the current crop of work, the things that have been made during the pandemic. I guess I'd love to know like what you think the future should bring. Which paths should we be taking? Are there any lessons learned that we should retain in the future? So I'd love to return to you, Ashwari.
Yeah, definitely. No, I think the one thing which I felt was sort of that stood out was that, you know, because it's COVID time and we've managed to get all this brilliant work across and dealt with, you know, clients and people, and because film in general is such a collaborative work, and we've still managed to pull all of these amazing films. I think as a species we are really resilient, and it's incredible, and I think we should really pat our backs for this. And like, you know, I mean, I think the only thing that I would like to sort of look forward to is sort of not to forget that. And also what we have done is we've sort of, even though you know, we have this fear of what the future might hold, we have reinvented and redefined what human connection could be in this pandemic, and how we could also find this new normal of or ways of working which are healthier and safer. Yeah, and I think in terms of the future, I think we should be working towards authenticity, and, you know, keep our this this nerve of sort of trying to find various ideas of imagination and innovation going, because we are such intelligent species, and you know, there is a message out there and we need to really closely listen to it. Yeah,
I think before the pandemic, it was very normal to see shootings, crowd of people, you know, with a lot of people inside, like clients, like the creatives, like people that were doing the shooting. And with the pandemic, we had to be more economic in that field, you know. We can use a lot of people inside the place. We can keep them safe if you have this amount of people. So this is something that it's about to change, you know. Now you know that we can produce something with less resources. So it's good in a way because it's cheaper and it's better for the work, because I don't know why, but it's changing, you know. We saw so many good work that they did in a way with less resources, that I think we'll keep doing the same, you know, in the future. For me, that's what is changing from now to the future.
So you'd maybe like to see the death of indulgence.
Perhaps.
Great. Well, and Shireen, what are your thoughts?
I won't be repeating what Atauri and Paulo just mentioned, because it's just right. Everything is correct, and we need to learn from what we've done. I believe as people who work in that field, we're very lucky, because you can really affect people's emotions in a very positive way. I think what I've seen throughout the judging and throughout my DNAD experience made me feel, if we were able to pull off that during a pandemic, we can do things that can change the world. And this is how I've always believed. A producer should be for me as a producer, I should be a great storyteller. It's not about producing something. It can be on a small scale or a big scale. It's all about the content. Content has always been the king and needs to remain in that manner. One simple idea with few talented people committed to deliver a piece of content that can move human beings can always create magic. And this is all what it takes. So as you guys just said a few minutes ago, a strong idea, you don't need to try too hard sometimes. Maybe you just need to do it right, give it the right amount of everything, and craft it. Crafting matters. And I think this is all what DNAD is all about. So I'm really optimistic, because we're more flexible on all fronts. Clients are even more flexible, getting things done in a much easier way and manner. And this, we should continue with it, even post the pandemic?
I think exactly the same. I don't remember anything from big productions. It didn't stay in my mind, like a lot of money, a lot of things going on if there's no a good idea behind. So for me, it's a good idea and good work. Money and bigger, like more people and everything, it doesn't matter. So it's just how it is. Yeah.
I think the narrative is always going to change, and I think you pointing this out at the beginning of the hour, of like narrative kind of takes the key, and I think narrative does that, and you know, maybe this is also I'm a theater kid, so you know, plays and theater and everything else still goes hand in hand with everything I like to do. Is like, you know, what is the main motivation? I think even in even shorter narratives, even shorter ads, the ones that really grip us are the narratives that you guys are pointing out, or y'all are pointing out that it was these, it didn't matter how large these productions have to be, that, you know, even a smaller production, even if you have a smaller budget or whatever, it can still be impacting, it can still be engaging, it can still be meaningful. I think that comes from people coming together to make focusing on the narrative more and creating a more stronger narrative, and saying like, you know, we're not just coming in with a you know, regular businessman, and just doing the age-old thing and being like, no, why don't we think about who we haven't talked about, who is in like part of the room, who's in the room, and whose stories actually need to be told, and then actually making that possible, actually believing in that. I think there's something to be said about having tokenism and actually having real like representation, real actual like, what do we call it, cohesiveness, actual teamwork or whatever. There's a difference, you know. So yeah. I mean, I think I've been seeing it a lot more, which I'm really surprised. I hope that keeps happening. But when it comes to people coming together and making actual, real, meaningful work that includes people and also tells a decent story, yeah, I think that's what we're gonna probably be learning from this, you know.
Well, thanks so much, all of you. I think the clock has run down now, so I'm gonna let you all go back to your life and work. But thanks so much for all your amazing insights, and I'm sure the nominees and the winners will be thrilled to hear what you've had to say about them, and to kind of learn your reasoning for picking their work and highlighting their works. And you know, I guess thanks again, and thanks to D&AD for organizing this panel.